Welcome to 10-Minute Tuesdays, EduPlanet's series of conversations with experts in education. My name is Taylor Parks, and I lead our customer success team. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Phil Muscott, Head of Curriculum at CIA First International School. Earlier this year, we had a chance to speak with Phil about CIA First pathway to integrating UBD and habits of mind. So today, we would like to specifically focus on performance tasks and rubrics. Phil, it's great to speak with you today.
Always a pleasure to speak with you, Taylor.
Before we get into the meat of the conversation, can you provide a 30-second primer on CIA First?
Sure. CIA First International School is a private international school located in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. We opened our doors in 2004. Our curriculum uses understanding by design and the habits of mind, focused on 21st century skills and global competencies. We're fully accredited by ACS WASC from pre-kindergarten right through to grade 12. We currently have just short of 2,800 students, 89% of whom are Cambodian nationals, and the other 11% are made up of over 20 different nationalities.
So I guess to kick things off, can you please talk about what a performance task is and what it consists of?
So the idea behind a performance task is that we want to move our assessments towards something that is authentic, to be able to assess the students' abilities to transfer their learning and to solve real-world problems.
So what are some of the challenges that you face when you're creating performance tasks with real-world problems, and how has CIA First overcome those challenges?
So I'd like to start with ancient and classical Rome, because it's a favorite topic of mine. And it never goes away from the curriculum, and quite rightly so. I mean, if you remember what Napoleon Bonaparte said, that the story of Rome is the story of the world. So that there really are some overarching, eternal big ideas there about government, politics, economics, military, so on and so forth. So it really is a very deep topic to keep in the curriculum. So when I was developing or working with my curriculum developers to develop a performance task for that, now the one that always kind of comes up is, you can set a grasped task, so you can give an authentic role and say that you're a historian and you're working, for an online magazine or something like that, and your task is to, explain to the readers or the listeners the reasons why the Roman Empire fell. So it kind of, it has some of the tenets of being authentic. But then when you really think about it, so many people have written about the reasons, the factors that led to the fall of the Roman Empire, that you can just Google it. So this is where you've got to be really cautious. And whilst that has some of the tenets of the facet of understanding explanation, it doesn't really hit the mark if you can essentially just synthesize what people have already said.
Right.
So the next stage of thinking is that, well, okay, perhaps to make it a bit more authentic, we could give the students the role of an emperor, maybe in the 5th century CE, and then pose more, what decisions would you have made in order to stop the fall of the Western Roman Empire? So I think
really in the middle of that.
Absolutely. And then you get into more of the facets, including empathy as well. Mm-hmm. But then again, there's plenty of actually historians have written about that as well. So that doesn't really cut the mustard as an authentic performance task, although it is getting closer. So the next, let's say, evolution in our thinking is, okay, well, what do you really want students to be able to do? And it's really to be able to transfer their learning to a new context. So we then started thinking more along the lines of, okay, well, how are these understandings about government and politics and economics relevant to the world today? And if you start looking at other empires, and if we can class the USA as an empire, which I think an argument could be made, certainly an economic one, and then really, you know, a lot of the issues that Rome faced, the US is facing the same things, albeit, you know, almost 2,000 years later. And that is the devaluation of the currency, inflation, say overextended military, things like that. Maybe the loss of patriotism and the pursuit of material wealth and the individual, and all of those things are definitely you know, synonymous. So if you could then give the students an authentic performance task where they are perhaps a president of the United States, and using their knowledge, skills, understandings, and cognition that they developed throughout their study of Rome, solve some real world problems today, i.e., how would you prevent the same thing happening in the US?
Now, not only is it real world, but they can't just Google the answer. They can definitely solve a problem that hasn't been solved yet, and they have to then transfer their knowledge.
There we go. Now there is one challenge with that, because it's the eternal enemy of all educators, which is time. Because the problem is, ideally, you want the performance task to have different topical content than the actual unit itself, because we want to get away from the students being able to answer this via recall. But if you're changing the topical content, of course, you need to give the students the time to research and actually, in this case, you know, find out what the contemporary economic issues are. So that does give you a challenge, and sometimes, you know, you have to compromise a little bit with that. But I think you're getting the idea of what the challenges are and the direction that certainly we're trying to go towards.
Sure. And you've given some nice actionable steps and kind of ideas that you need to really think through when you're really embarking on creating an authentic performance task. I think that's going to be very useful for our listeners.
Sure, and if you don't mind, I'd like to maybe give one more example, and that's, again, it's middle school and it's mathematics. So, you know, when you're trying to design a problem rather than an exercise for mathematics, that's quite a challenge as well. So I was working with my team, and they'd come up with a task where actually the students were manufacturers, and they were actually making a doll, and they wanted to make it quite lifelike. So they were asked to use ratio and proportion, yeah, from the real individual, and, you know, so they could sell a lifelike doll. So then when we thought about it, well, that's not really a problem, because it's obvious to the students that the algorithm, if you like, that they need to plug in to solve that is ratio and proportion. So really that's just, again, a glorified exercise. So what we really want to do when we're creating a mathematical problem is make it unclear to the student which algorithm or algorithms they need to plug in and in which order. So we made the task a bit more complex and made it more of an economic problem to say that you need to make these dolls, but also you want to make it cost efficient in terms of production and in terms of packaging. Okay, so then they have to find out the cost of materials, okay, and then they have to look at the different packaging options and then decide on the size. But so they're still using ratio and proportion, but they also need to use other mathematical processes, multiplication, addition, division, and such forth. So then you can see it becomes far more authentic.
So I think those are two great examples, and thank you for kind of approaching it from two different subject areas as well. Although I did hear a lot of ways that you could integrate across subject areas and some of that. Thank you, Phil, so much for talking to us about performance tasks and their development. We really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.